When I was a kid, I think we can put the next slide up. I think I was 7. I was in first grade. So that's me and my siblings. I also have an adopted brother who's not in there because we hadn't adopted him yet. But I'm the second one down the line, so I'm the second oldest. And my family went to Wyoming for vacation on a dude ranch. Anybody ever been to a dude ranch before? Yeah, so it was just so beautiful. We stayed in this cabin thing, and I remember the hills of Wyoming even at that young age, I remember being struck by the colors of the leaves. And so that was us at the Amtrak station. We took the train to Wyoming, and then when we were there, one day we went on a family horse ride. So my whole family, we all got on our own horses, and we had a guide, and we went up in the mountains, and I think the next slide has a picture of us. Okay, so I'm on the far left, and I could barely get my legs into the stirrups. I mean, this is a big black horse, and I was this little first grader. And so we were on these horses, and so we went up, and I think it was a couple of hours ride up in the mountains of Wyoming. It was just beautiful. And we were coming back, and so we're on the home stretch, and we had this big pasture to go through, and then you kind of turn and you went into the horse corral for the horses to come home. Now, does anybody have horses, know about horses? Okay, so you might know that sometimes when horses get close to their home, they take off. Yeah. So here I was, this little girl on this big horse, and all of a sudden, my horse took off. And I remember my feet flew out of the stirrups. I was bouncing on the saddle, grabbing to the mane, grabbing onto the brim of the saddle, and just screaming, right? And my horse just galloped off down that pasture, turned to go into his corral, and there was this narrow opening that he could go in, and on either side was a big tall fence. And I remember as a little girl thinking, he's gonna jump the fence, he's gonna jump the fence, he's gonna jump the fence, I'm flailing, he's gonna jump the fence. Well, he didn't jump the fence, he ended up going through and he stopped. Here comes the guide, here comes my family. Are you okay, are you okay? The first thing I said, and I don't even know why I said this, it's the first lie I remember telling. I said, my horse jumped the fence. And they're like, oh, your horse jumped the fence, you stayed on. And it became this tall tale, right? And everyone was so amazed that I stayed on my horse and it jumped that fence. And honestly, the minute I said it, I was like, I kind of felt guilty, right? And then we go back to the dude ranch and, we're having dinner and my parents are talking about it. And I was like, oh, and I kind of thought I should tell the truth, but I was scared and I didn't. So we get home. So my mom has a lot of sisters, and so I remember her calling her sisters, and Aunt Marianne, Jenny's horse jumped the fence, Aunt Connie, Jenny's horse jumped the fence, Aunt Julie, Aunt Sheila, and I remember just hearing the story come up from time to time over the years and my toes curling in shame, right? It didn't happen, right? And you know those stories that you kind of like, you all get together for holidays and it's kind of the stories you talk about? Well, this seemed to be one of them, right? And I always dreaded when it would come up. And there I am in high school, and this horse story would come up, and I'd think, I have to, this didn't, should I confess, And then I go to college, and it's even worse, and I'm just like, okay, I'm an adult now. Like, I've got to fess up to this thing, right? But you know what, you guys? I was embarrassed, and it's a little silly lie. I had shame. It was such a big thing. The secret had grown so big that I just couldn't bring myself to confess. I couldn't bring myself to say, you guys, you know what? Actually, that really didn't happen, Okay, it gets worse. So then I have kids, right? And my kids are at my mom and dad's house. And I hear them in the other room. My mom says, did we ever tell you the story when your mom's horse jumped the fence? And I'm like, no! And I'm thinking, I gotta run in there and tell them it's a lie. And then I was like, oh no, but I'm trying to teach them not to lie. So how would that look? So I can't confess it now. I have to wait till they're older, right? And it just became this thing, honestly. I had tucked it away for so long, I couldn't share it, right? And so finally, here's how I ended up finally sharing it, you guys. I went through a Bible study. This was just 3 years ago. 40 years old. 40 years old. And for you Bible study writers and teachers, Bible studies change lives. change lives. Oh my goodness, this was one of those. So my friend was actually leading the study, and the topic was unconfessed sin. And by this time in my life, I had gone through healing, and there were so many things hiding under my rocks that I had already dug out and I dealt with, and I had experienced freedom and healing from. And I knew the power in shedding light on secrets. I knew it. And so, but there's still this stupid little horse story, you know? And so she was talking, and she said, think about it. Is there anything in your life? What's hiding under your tent? Because it'll steal your joy at one point or another. It'll make you feel bad about yourself at one point or another. What's hiding under your tent? And I'm like, okay, I've gone through all this revealing and telling, and now it's this horse story thing. So I said, okay, you know what? I said, God, you know what? I'm going to confess this. I'm going to do it. 40 years old, I can do it. And so I went home and did the brave thing. I wrote an email to, I'm serious, to my whole family. And I had this whole, you remember the story in Wyoming of the horse? It really didn't happen, and I'm so sorry, all these years I've been wanting to tell you, blah, 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 this big, long dissertation, right? And so I didn't send it. I chickened out. And so I said, well, you know what? Okay, I've got it ready, and I will do that sometime, but I don't think now is the right time, and it's really not that big of a deal. It's just stupid. It's not a big deal. Go to the study the next day. What's the topic? Delayed confession. I am not kidding you. Sometimes you have an intention to confess and you move forward, but then you don't really do it. And I was like, oh my goodness. Okay, I'm doing it. So long story short, I talked to my mom, I talked to my family, and you know what, you guys? When you get a secret out, it dissolves. I'm telling you. And again, I know that's a silly example, but my mom, she says to me, oh, Jenny, I feel so bad you kept that inside so many years, So it's a silly story, you guys, and like I said, believe me, I've had some other way more serious things that I've had to work through. And I just want to share a quote from my friend Laura, who I mentioned before. And this goes right along with crying for you. She says, give yourself permission to acknowledge and accept your feelings because they're real and legitimate. When you do that, you're able to accept your children's ranges of emotions as legitimate too, and you're able to accept them for who they are and not who you want them to be. When we acknowledge and work through our own feelings as moms, we become healthier and happier, and so do our kids. Our freedom directly impacts the freedom of our kids. And I know sometimes we think about, this crying for you, this actively pursuing healing from the things that we know are stealing our joy can be scary. It was scary for me. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. It was scary for me. It can sound like too much work. You don't have time. You don't want to bother. Life's short, move on, get over it. I've been there. But there's such joy on the other side. It's worth it. And crying for you doesn't mean you have to dwell there. I love the verse, the promise in Isaiah 43, 18, 19. Forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. We don't have to dwell there. God is always doing a new thing. And the cool thing is he has a way of prompting us when we need healing. You guys might be feeling that prompting right now. I remember, the quickening of the heart, the tug, the knowing that you have something that, maybe once and for all, you need to lay that down. Maybe once and for all. Because stuffing our feelings and not acknowledging them, it doesn't help us. They're not going to go away. I remember, for years, I minimized and tucked things away that I had done as a teenager or that had been done to me that I felt really bad about. And I had just tucked them away. And, they're really not a big deal. I just decided, move on. Like I said, life's short, no big deal. Stuff. But here's the thing. Unresolved issues always come out in some way. And as moms, they can come out in ways that can impact our kids. For me, they initially came out in the form of an eating disorder in college, where I really struggled with food and my self-image. I felt so bad about the things that I had done or that had been done to me. And I thought at that time that God was this kind of pie-in-the-sky guy, who might strike me down at any minute with lightning because I was so bad, right? And most of my prayers were prayers of, please forgive me, please forgive me, please forgive me. And he's so good. He intervened in my life in so many ways, from, people, church, all those different things at that time, gave me exactly what I needed and taught me about his unconditional love. His unconditional love. And that healed me from that. I found such freedom in knowing I was loved no matter what. I was forgiven. And so, but healing is kind of like the layer of an onion. You go through different phases. Sometimes it takes time. All our journeys are different. And so when Katie and Luke were getting older, and Katie started approaching her teen years, I started feeling this other layer coming up for me. Kids hit ages. We start thinking about those ages. Things come up we might not have remembered or we haven't thought about in years. And I remember I started having a lot of fear as a mom. I was like, are they going to make some of the same choices I made? Are they going to be put in some of the same circumstances I was going to be put in? And I became fearful. It was nagging at me. And I remember one night, just literally being up most of the night, toiling, worrying, struggling with some memories. And I remember getting up that morning and putting my feet on the ground, and I remember saying, okay, God, I do not know what's going on, but you have to help me. I need help. That was my first prayer. Like this, I need help. And I had to pray for courage because I was scared. Like I kind of didn't want to go there. I really wasn't sure all that was going on. And I had this sense of knowing that, you got to deal with some stuff still, Jenny. You got to deal with some stuff. And it was impacting my parenting. My kids didn't necessarily know it. I knew it. I was fearful of the teenage years. And so in my own healing, again, God just, you pray that prayer. And if you're at a place where you need help, maybe your starting point is just, God, I need help. Give me the courage to cry for me. Give me the courage to take this step, because he is faithful and he will answer. And he, brought, again, people and a Bible study that brought me such freedom and healing. And for me, the healing, so much of the healing was in the telling. Being in this study, this 13-week study with these other women, and being able to share for the first time some of the secrets I had kept inside for years was so freeing. There was freedom in the telling. And so I would just encourage you, if you have something that you've been holding inside, maybe this is your weekend for the first time to bring that secret into the light. Get it out of darkness. Let it lose its power, because it will.